Come on, R2, we're going.
I'm not sure if this is a misremembrance on my part, but somewhere way back in the day, I seem to remember George Lucas talking about how he wanted the droids to be witnesses to the story of Star Wars. Not just that the story would be told from their perspective, which it kind of is for a little while, but that they would be witnesses to the key events of the story. I believe there's a modern reference to Lucas calling R2-D2 the narrator of Star Wars, and while I'm not really sure that that term quite resonates with me, if we take a closer look, we can see that the droids really are witnesses to almost the entire story. And in the case of R2-D2, he specifically witnesses most of the key events of Luke Skywalker's journey and events involving the Force. So let's take a closer look. Of course, this first scene doesn't involve Luke directly, but it is the catalyst for the entire story and ultimately what sets Luke's journey in motion. But moving forward, R2 witnesses Luke's first comments about Ben, comments that he's sort of manipulating Luke to divulge so that he can complete his mission. He's then witness to Luke's first conversation with Ben, which 3PO is out of commission for. Later, at Ben's home, watch how he turns his head here, indicating that he's paying attention as Ben gives Luke his lightsaber and reveals key information about the Force and Luke's father. And again, 3PO is shut down for most of this. R2 is of course present as Luke makes his declaration to follow in his father's footsteps. He's also there the first time Ben uses the Force. And look how he's in frame here as Ben tells Luke he's taken his first step into a larger world. R2 is of course central in the scene where Luke and Han decide to try and free Leia. And here he is passing right by Luke before Ben is killed. He utters a couple of sad little beeps as he's present with Luke as he grieves the loss of Ben. And later, R2 serves his main purpose in the film by delivering the plans that Luke and his fellow pilots are then briefed on. And R2 is of course right along with Luke for the Death Star battle, even up to the point that Luke turns off his targeting computer and chooses to rely on the Force. R2's journey with Luke continues in The Empire Strikes Back. He scans for him when he's missing and is delighted to greet him upon his return.
R2 expresses his relief also.
As Luke departs from Hoth, there's this wonderful little scene where R2 tries to gain control of Luke's X-Wing to steer him away from going to Dagobah. He must be wondering what the heck Luke is up to and what he himself is in for. But luckily, Luke is no longer falling for R2's little manipulations like he was back on Tatooine. And so here we are on Dagobah, which I feel is really an environment that represents Luke's mind. This is incredibly intimate stuff for R2 to be witnessing. Luke's first steps into the depths of his own consciousness, the real serious, dirty, challenging work of his inner journey. And here's R2 offering some resistance to Luke's eventual teacher, sort of echoing Luke's attitude. He's told to stay and watch after the camp, but he elects to follow Luke and peek in on what's happening. Look how he's visible through the little window throughout this entire scene. I mean, this is a scene where so much about Yoda and Luke are revealed and discussed. And even Ben is present in this conversation. Does R2 hear Ben? He certainly hears Yoda and Luke's responses to him. What does he think about all of this? It's so interesting. He's present for pretty much everything on Dagobah. Luke's attempt to lift his X-Wing, Yoda's beautiful explanation of the Force, and Yoda raising the entire ship from the swamp. He's lifted by the Force, witnesses Luke having his vision of the future, and is there for his subsequent conversation with Yoda before leaving Dagobah. A conversation in which Ben's ghost physically appears this time. R2 remains with Luke right up until he gets cut off from him for his confrontation with Vader. He's reunited with him as Luke looks off into an uncertain future, forever changed by the events of the film. In Return of the Jedi, R2 is witness to Luke communicating with Vader and finishing the construction of his new lightsaber in this deleted scene. He relays Luke's message and later arms Luke with his saber, setting into motion the events of Jabba's downfall. Later, on Dagobah, watch how he turns his head here to witness Luke's conversation with Ben. So can he see Ben? I mean, he's certainly watching the conversation take place. R2 is here in the cockpit as Luke senses Vader, and of course he witnesses this very public display of Luke utilizing the Force to impress the Ewoks. Later, he helps 3PO tell the story of Star Wars and maybe sees Luke exit the hut to have his heart-to-heart conversation with Leia. But then he's cut off from him for his interactions with Vader, just like in Empire. And in this final scene, he's at least visible as Luke looks off to see the ghosts of his teachers and father. R2 is also featured prominently in this climactic shot, the end of the story and of Luke's journey. So, what are the real-world takeaways from R2 being a witness to Luke's journey? Well, in ancient myths and legends, we sometimes find characters who are witnesses or storytellers. For example, in the ancient Indian epic the Mahabharata, a gifted royal minister called Sanjay witnesses key events of the story, including Krishna's intimate spiritual dialogue with the Prince Arjuna, and then describes them to his king. In the gospel tradition, something with historical and legendary aspects, some authors refer to or are explicitly said to be witnesses to Jesus' life and teachings. So this idea of someone witnessing meaningful events of a person's spiritual journey is not without precedent. I think it's just such a cool aspect of the mythological style of storytelling that Star Wars is told from. A witness is a character who is our lens into the world that the narrative is taking place in. And beyond myth and legend, in our own daily lives, all of us are witnesses to many key events and interactions that take place in the journeys of those around us, as well as our own. By being keen observers of these journeys, we can benefit from the many important lessons we witness, as well as reflect on our own personal growth. I guarantee there are ways that you've grown as an individual that benefit you and that others could learn from, just as we all learned from observing Luke's journey. So, this covers R2-D2 as a witness in the story of Star Wars, but what about C-3PO? What is he witness to? We'll take a look at that in another video. For now, thanks so much for watching, and may the Force be with you.